folks. Welcome, hello, to another episode of the Prophet Easy One. This time, I'm going to talk about Samson. And what did Samson look like? Was he like they show in the movies? Alright, now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give you some testimony, and I'm going to get into the Word and show you some things that God has shown me. And hopefully these things will be an encouragement to you. Yes, no doubt about it. Okay, well, sometime back in the early 80s, I had a very wealthy man named Bob Blumenkrautz in Maryland who tried to hire me to manage all his properties and to run his real estate company. He offered me a huge mansion and some very wealthy estates with a big gym inside. I mean, a beautiful place. That was part of my compensation. $70,000 a year to manage his, as I recall, it was like 285 homes that he had, most of which were at very low mortgage balances, plus an override on commissions for trading his agents, because I was a licensed real estate broker at the time and pretty well known and doing quite well. Well, here I am at his house and everything. This is sounding good. I'm like, wow. Hey, yeah, this is good. And I was a fairly young man still, but I did know my stuff. Well, he told me all these things and I'm like, wow, I'm ready to sign on the dotted line. And then he said to me, and not only that, but you'll have a lot of power. I said, power? What do you mean? He said, well, I'll show you. And he started flipping through his portfolio of all these homes that he had. He said, okay, you see these people here? I want them out. I said, yeah. So what are you going to do, evict them? He says, no, that's what I'm trying to tell you. So he put the phone on speakerphone. He called the sheriff's department. And he knew the guy by name, and the guy recognized him and called him by name. And he says, what can I do for you, Bob? Bob says, well, I got some people I want out. And he gave them the address and asked how soon could they get them out. They said, we'll have them out of there tomorrow. Now, I knew that this was totally illegal. So all of a sudden, I thought, you know what? I don't want to be a part of this. So I told him I would have to think about it, and I left. And the next thing you know, I get a call a few days later from a preacher woman with a disabled son who was hurting for money and had gone to this guy. And the way that he would get all these houses, he had ads that he would loan money. And he would loan the money, but at usurious interest rates. Anyway, I want to make a long story short. The woman happened to call me because I had an ad in the Homes magazine that said, if you're going to foreclosure, call me and I can help. Well, when she told me what was going on, I looked and I got in touch with Bob, and he had this thing set up to where if you didn't pay back this money, and here's what happens with these poor people. First off, if you didn't pay back the money, then he'd get your house. Now, the woman had a very low mortgage balance. He loaned her the money, like I say, at exorbitant interest rates, with a very short term to pay it back. Like 3 months, I believe it was. Now, here's the thing. You give a poor person who's really hurting a bunch of money, and they're making a real small income, they're going to spend that money, and they're not going to be able to pay it back. And Bob knew that, and that's how he would get all these houses. And the sheriff's department, at least a whole lot of them, maybe all of them, I don't know, were in with him on it. This was a very corrupt county anyway with the police, Prince George's County, Maryland. Anyway, as it turned out, the next, I couldn't go anywhere without getting pulled over. I had the police kidnapped my son one day while I was having breakfast. When I got up and went to the bathroom, came back, my son was gone. I had 2 plainclothes policemen coming at me with clubs. I was telling them, hey, back up, and where's my son? I was hot, and I'm talking to other people, hey, what happened? And they were scared. Nobody wanted to answer. So they kept me there for a while. Every time they'd approach me, I'd say, "Hey man, you need to back up or I'm going to throw this Coke right in your face." So they intentionally kept me there for a little bit. And they said, "Okay, you're free to go." And when I went out, there's like 30 policemen all outside the place. And I thought they were there to help. Like I say, I got away from that day. I'm going to make a long story short. What ended up happening is sometime later, I ended up going on the lam because of all these things they were doing. And you wouldn't believe what I was going through at the time. But I was doing a job for a woman, Edie Johnson, who had written 2 books for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. She worked for them. I'd sold her house years ago. I painted, years before. I painted the outside of it. Now, she had an unfinished basement. Now I'm finishing her basement and putting in a driveway. And I did that so that I could get money to get an attorney so that I could fight these people. Well, I'm in the house. I'm finished completely with the inside. It's all beautiful. She's real happy. I got the driveway just about done. The concrete's coming the next morning. And all of a sudden, here I am. I walk into the bathroom of the place, already bathroom. I go in, and I'm walking to the toilet. The bathtub was ahead. The sink was on my left. And as I'm walking in, all of a sudden, it's like my feet were stuck to the ground. I couldn't move them. I'm like, man, these are brand new floors with layers of wax. And my feet would not move. And then I heard a voice say to me, "I want to show you something." And I turned and I looked out of the room and I said, "Who is that?" Because I thought the door was closed. I didn't know who was in there. And I got no answer. And then I hear again, "I want to show you something." And I thought, wow. Or actually, at that point, I realized there was no one in the room with me or in the entire basement. And that the voice was coming from directly over my head. And I looked up and I said, "Wow, God, is that you?" But I got no answer. I got again that, "I want to show you something." I said, "Okay, what do you want to show me?" And he says, the voice says, and it's the only time God has ever spoken to me audibly that I recall. But the voice says to me, "The police are going to catch you tonight." And oh, my heart split in two. Half of it was in my throat and half of it was in my stomach. But then he said, "But don't worry." So immediately I thought, wow, okay. And I said, "Well, what are you trying to show me?" And then I looked into that mirror, the mirror that was behind the sink next to me where my feet were stuck. And all of a sudden, all my blood veins were sticking out everywhere. I mean, wow, and I felt strong. And then I kept hearing, "I'm going to show you something." And then next, it's like this second wave went through me, like a wave of adrenaline. And I felt even stronger. And then there was a third wave. And I looked, and I was shirtless at the time. And all my blood vessels were sticking out everywhere, even though I felt totally relaxed. But I knew that I had the strength that I could have gone out and taken my friend's truck. He was letting me use his truck so that I wouldn't be recognized. It was a person who worked for me. And I knew I had the strength to go over and take that Mazda pickup truck and just flip it right over. Just like people do sometimes at accident scenes, where all of a sudden their strength comes upon them. All right, well, sure enough, that night, well, I told Edie Johnson about it. Like I say, she worked for the Archdiocese of Washington, was a good friend, sister. And she said, "Oh, Raul." And I told her that the Lord had told me that the police were going to catch me that evening because she was letting me stay at her house there till I got done. And she said, "Well, Raul, no, they won't catch you. Let's put curtains up on all the windows and block them on." I said, "Edie, I don't want to put any holes in all your new drywall." I said, "Besides, if he said that they're going to catch me, then they're going to catch me." So Sure enough, that night, one of my workers came back, and he was going to spend the night there with me, Joe Black, as we called him. Uh, anyway, I'm laying there at night, and I'm actually sleeping like this on my side. And I had my Bible next to me. And the only thing, this was a huge family room, the only thing on was a little TV. But sure enough, in came some policemen. And I cracked an eye a little bit to look, and as I was laying there like this, I said, "Oh Lord, please deliver me from my enemies," because these people had not been trying to give me any justice. They were trying to do me in so that I could not testify about these things that were happening. They tried to bribe me, which I wasn't going for a bribe. They told me I needed to come down off my high horse. And no, I was a realtor. You have a code of ethics. And besides, it was just the right thing to do to try to help this woman. And I'm leaving a few things out here because, like I say, I'm trying to keep this as brief as possible. I can see already it's going to go long. But I thought, what am I going to do? And they came up and they said, "Is that him? You think, is that him?" I said, I don't know. What about him? Looking at Joe. Now, Joe was a very dark-skinned black guy. And he said, "No, that's not him." And me, I'd changed my appearance, had dyed my hair. I was only trying to get an attorney so that I could get some justice and get some things done and help take care of this lady. Well, next thing you know, he says, "I don't know, but put the cuffs on him anyway." So I lay there. I waited till the last second, and just as he was about to throw the cuffs on me, now I didn't want to hurt them. I just immediately jumped up screaming, thinking that would startle them enough and give me time to get out the back. And by the way, what I done is, when you went out the back there, now there was steel bars on all the windows, steel bars on the doors. There was a big solid wood door with a little triangular window in it. And what I did is I left the key in the lock that night. It was a deadbolt. I'd never done that before, but I knew that they were coming. And then was a storm door with the little latch that it has. And outside of that was the steel bars. And I had those locked. Well, the next thing you know, I'm tasered in the back. As I tried not to hurt them. In fact, I didn't lay a finger on them. I got up and I tried to get to that door, and they shot me with the taser, and immediately I hit the ground. I thought I'd been shot twice by bullets. So I got up and I stood in the corner of the room with my hands up, and I said, "I give up. I give up, man. Call me an ambulance." And instead, they did one of those things that policemen often like to do. They began tasering me again. Well, I just went, "Wah!" And I reached around and I felt these wires. And so it dawned on me what was happening. And I reached back, was able to pull one of the darts out of me, but I was still getting electrocuted. And so I finally ripped the wire out of the gun. And then I tried to make it for the back door. I approached one of the guys first, opened, to scare him a little. Make a long story short, they grabbed me. I was getting beat with flashlights. I had several cracked vertebrae. They busted my head open. They ripped my t-shirt all up. Yet I never laid a finger on them. But I get through this little door to go into the kitchen, and when I went to lock it, I realized that the little locking mechanism wasn't there. My thumb went into the hole. And next to that was a freezer that Edie had that was full of stuff. And I was going to flip that freezer over in front of the door, but I didn't want to ruin Edie's freezer or her food. And these cops are reaching through and trying to get me. Now, what had happened is I had so much strength that when they were wrestling with me, one guy had to be 6'4", the other guy, a very tall guy. The other guy was about 6'1", a black guy, very stocky. And he was the one hitting me while the other guy was trying to hold me. Well, I'd been hit a few times, and I'm thinking, oh man, I got to get out of here. And I had so much strength that I was able to take this 6'4" guy and pick him up like he was an 80-pound ballerina. And every time he'd say, "Hit him now, hit him now," I'd wait till the last second, I'd spin him around, and his buddy kept hitting him. He's, man, don't hit me, hit him. He said, well, I'm trying to keep him still. So I did this several times, and finally this guy broke his buddy's jaw. So he released me. That's when I got through the doors. Now here they are reaching through trying to get me, and I got my foot in front of the door and I'm holding it, and it was like it took nothing to hold it back. And they're pushing and trying to get through and reaching around the door trying to grab me, and I kept saying, hey, get your arms out. You need to get your arms out. And then I heard all these policemen upstairs, and they'd heard the screaming, but they had steel bars between the upstairs and the basement to get through, and those were locked. So I hear battering ram, quick. And I'm thinking, oh boy, I got to get out of here. And I could hear them running across the floor upstairs. So I said, get your arms out now or I'll break them. Well, what happened, the one guy's already got a broken jaw. He didn't want a broken arm too. So when he went to try to get out of the way, he pushed his buddy and broke his buddy's arm. Now, meanwhile, I know I got to leave now. I go and I quickly unlock that wooden door. I'm fumbling trying to unlock that storm door, and I just could. Actually, it was the steel bars were inside, then the storm door on the outside, and I'm reaching through those steel bars and trying to get my finger to undo that little latch on the storm door, and I couldn't get it. And that's when I heard battering ram quick in the footsteps. So I just grabbed those steel doors and boom, and everything came out. The frame of the steel door, the frame of the storm door, and it came down onto these steps because this was in the basement. And immediately I start scrambling up those steps, running through the steel bars on the storm door, and I hear, freeze or I'll shoot. And I turn around and looked up behind me, and here's a man on the rear patio above me with his gun pointed right at my back. You know, that the end of that barrel was probably 8 or 9, 10 feet away from my back. And he made a mistake of saying, man, what the hell's going on down there? Because he'd heard all the screaming. And I said, I don't know, but I'm getting the hell out of here. So he didn't know whether to shoot me or not. So anyway, I run up there and run up the steps, and I went and jumped over a chain link fence that was there, thinking it was just a 4-foot fence, not realizing it was on an 8-foot wall because I was in a very hilly area and the neighbor's yard was much lower. And so I ended up actually doing a flip in the air, landed on my feet, took off running. I saw there was police cars everywhere. So I'm taking off. I don't even know the area that well. And next you know, police cars are going everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh man, Lord, please help me. And I came up on like 6-foot high stockade fences and was able to jump them like they were just little fences. Oh, I could tell you some wild stories about what happened, and I'm going to leave the rest of what happened that night alone for now, other than I ended up sleeping that night with a ripped up t-shirt, a pair of bathing suits, and a pair of socks on. I ended up sleeping in the woods, and there was still snow on the ground. It was cold. I thought I would freeze, but I didn't. And I sure went through a lot that night. They had the SWAT team out there, and the regular police. The SWAT team was much smarter. But here I am laying there behind a tree. I guess this video is going to go longer than I expected, but I got to tell you this part. I'm laying up against this tree, and the SWAT team was smart. See, the policemen, they would come through the woods in straight lines. The SWAT team, they were all making Z's like this. So they were going to cover everything. And they were getting real close. Every time the guy would give a command, they would move again. And now I'm to the point where I'm right behind this tree. I'd covered the white socks and the stripe on the side of my bathing suit up with sticks and grass. And based on the way the guy was coming, I could pretty much hear him breathing where he was. And the next move, he was going to come around that tree. And I thought, wow, Lord, what am I going to do? So I'm thinking, I guess I'm going to grab the barrel of his rifle and throw it off into the woods and take off running. And I said, God, if it's not too, you already delivered me from my enemies once tonight. Could you please deliver me again? Could you make it rain? And no sooner than those thoughts, that word rain, came out of my head, you could hear some big raindrops hitting around in the woods. But it wasn't enough. I said, oh God, if you could please make it rain hard. And by the time that thought was out of my head, it was pouring down rain. And the leader of the SWAT team called them all back and they left. And that's where I slept that night. But because I didn't want to leave, I figured, oh, they're still going to be laying low out here waiting for me. But the feats of strength that he showed me, in fact, sometime later, when I got all this thing worked out, the police were saying that it was miracles that happened. Yeah, they were miracles, because I did not do all these things of my own strength. They said they'd never seen someone stand up to a taser, plus the fact that they'd actually cracked a few of my vertebrae, busted my head open. I had blood all over my ripped up t-shirt. But now, I want to go from there to the scriptures, to Samson. You got some of my testimony there. Now I want to go through some things about Samson, and let's determine if Samson was a big, muscular guy like they show in the movies. All right, now Samson is written about in Judges 13 through 16. Now it says that in 13:25, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move him at times in the camp of Dan. Okay, now you go on a little farther, and he's going with his parents. He's wanting to go marry this, I guess she was a Philistine woman, which his parents were against. But God had done that for an occasion, he says, that he might go after the Philistines. And as they're going to see her with his parents, it says here in verse 6 of chapter 14, and Samson went down, and his father and his mother to Timnah, and came towards Timnah, and behold, a young lion roared against him. And the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and he rent him as he would have rent a kid. And he had nothing in his hand. So, see, it says the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him. That's what had happened to me that night. It was the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon me. You know, God says, and I could tell you some things about that, and hopefully I will in another video, that happened during the same time while I was on the lam, where God had shown me a lot of things. And they ended up having orders to shoot to kill me, so everywhere I went, I had my Bible in my hand, and believe me, I was reading it, and I had my faith. I was walking with God. But now, let's go down to chapter 15, verse 14. It says, and when he came unto Lehi, the Philistines shouted against him, and the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the cords that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his hands loosed, the bands loosed from off his hands. See, once again, what happened? The Spirit of the Lord came upon him. All right, now let's go to chapter 16, verse 6 and 7. Let's see, was Samson a big, muscular-looking guy, or was he more like an average man? I'm here to tell you he was like an average man. Let's look here. Chapter 16, verse 6 and 7. Now, had God not have shown me what he did, I would not have known this. But it says, and Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, wherein thy great strength lieth, and wherein thou mightest be bound to afflict thee. Boy, well, she's really asking the wrong questions, isn't she? But she wants to know, where does his strength come from? Now, if he was a big body building looking guy, then naturally you'd say, well, look at the guy. That's where his strength comes from. And in the next verse, and Delilah said to Samson, Oh no, the next verse. And Samson said unto her, if they bind me with 7 green withs that were never dried, then shall I be weak and be as another man. See? If he was really big and strong and built, he wouldn't suddenly be weak. Okay, now let's go just a couple verses later. Verse 9. And now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he brake the withs as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. So his strength was not known. See, they didn't know where his strength came from. Like I say, if he was a big, mighty, strong-looking man, the Philistines and everybody would say, well, darn, look at where his strength comes from. Look at the size of the dude. It wasn't like that. Now let me go down to chapter 16, verse 20. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he woke out of his sleep and said, now this is after she cut his hair off. She convinced him to do it. It says, and he wake out of his sleep and said, I will go out as at other times before and shake myself. And he knew not that the Lord was departed from him. So now he's weak. This is when they captured him and they took his eyes out. They took his eyes out. They had him work in the prison grinding. Now he's a blind man. They shaved his head. But eventually his hair grew back. And actually, let me see if I can find that right now. It would be chapter 16. Anyway, that's what happened. His hair grew back, and it says that when it did that, basically that, here it says, and Samson called unto the Lord and said, O Lord God, remember me, I pray thee, and strengthen me, I pray thee, only this once, O God, that I may be at once avenged on the Philistines from my 2 eyes. See, Samson knew that his strength came from God. And you know, God used him as an occasion to go after those wicked Philistines. And you know, in the one instance, he killed 30 men. Later, it says, that's in verse 14, 19, he killed 30 men when they plowed with his heifer. In other words, told his wife that if she didn't tell them certain things, that they were going to burn her and her household. You know, she ended up telling them, and later they burned her and her household anyway. That should show you, hey, if you got a husband, you know what? You better trust him before you trust others, because the 2 of you have now become one. All right, and then in chapter 15, 8, said that he did a great slaughter with these people. And then 15 and 15 is where he took the jawbone of an axe and killed 1,000 Philistines and had them piled in heaps. And then in 16:9, 16:12, 16:14, he's killing all these guys who were laying in wait for him. I don't know how many it was. Could be 20 to 40 at each instance. So you're talking to another 60 to 120 men. And then finally in chapter 16, verse 27, he slew a lot of people when God gave him the strength back, and he pushed down the supporting columns of the temple. And it says there was 3,000 people on the roof alone. And I'm sure there was a lot of other people inside and outside the building, because they were mocking Samson at the time. So they all died. He slew more at that time than he had throughout the rest of his life. But I just want you to know, Samson was not like they portray him in the movies. All right, I'm going to stop this now, And maybe I'll get back with you again on some other things that God showed me during that time.